Aborigine sounds. Showtime.
Despite the common misconception that individuals with dark skin are of African descent, this claim is infrequently true. However, the notion persists and is often reiterated. In addition, the proponents of this fallacy persist in their assertion, stating that physical characteristics alone can determine a person's ethnicity, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Their declaration persists in the following manner.
Question. By Mr. Phillips. Is it a fact that they were much darker than the other Indians? Answer. Yes, it is a fact. Question. And the hair was different too. Answer. So it is stated by one of the most distinguished ethnologists in the world. Another corroborative proof is that the Spaniards found that one Negro was equal to 10 Indians for work, and they therefore imported these Indian Negroes and carried them to the West Indies to experiment with.
End quote. Apart from their acknowledgement of performing experiments on the indigenous Americans, there are other troubling aspects to take into account. We can discuss the other troubling aspects at a later time, but for now, it's worth noting that the acknowledgement of performing experiments on native inhabitants is a significant issue that cannot be ignored. It is evident that the black Indian population existed on this land long before Christopher Columbus set foot in the Americas. However, one of their misperceptions being that they did not originate from Africa. In fact, they have always resided in this country.
Right.
People who have a purpose will say, oh, well, they're all African, or they're, they're African American.
Right.
Well, no, we're not. We happen to be dark-skinned people, and actually, we're not even black. We're red-skinned. We're red-skinned. We're
red-skinned.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They say copper tone.
Exactly. It's redskins.
It's redskins.
Right. And hence the big debate with the Washington Redskins. Some look at it as being offensive. Some look at it as being derogatory. But what most people don't know is prior to the British immigrating to Virginia and Washington, who were there? The Redskins.
The Redskins. And that's exactly right. It is so pivotal that people really understand the literal meaning of things.
Exactly.
And what I mean by that is when people see dark-skinned Indians, and we're going to see some cousins, the Miccosukee.
Yes.
Today we're going down to Miami to see Leroy Osceola,
yes.
the traditional Miccosukee.
Yes.
When you see their ancestors, which are our ancestors,
yes.
you look at us. You're looking at mirror images of us.
Right.
And so that is important because when you see modern-day Miccosukee who have bred out a little bit,
right.
or are breeding out
right.
gradually,
right.
and
right.
they become lighter and lighter of skin.
Right.
Those with the truth will say, well, this is coming from the raping of our women,
right.
the raping of our children, and their skin tone gets lighter.
Right.
And I say that because, it is so, it becomes so controversial when people see people of our skin tone.
Who are lighter or darker.
Who are darker.
Exactly.
And then they say, oh, they're Africans. That is like saying all of the lighter versions of Native Americans in the West are Mexicans.
Exactly.
They get called that.
Sure.
They get called that.
It's ignorance.
It is ignorance.
It's sheer ignorance.
It's pure ignorance
right.
at its best.
Right.
And it's also a form of racism because it's a competition.
Right.
What is it that you don't want the
right.
dark-skinned Indians to achieve?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And you're perpetuating the same type of mentality or
ignorance.
mental ignorance that your ancestors have were part to, that they had subjected themselves through, and which what they were fighting about. You're
exactly.
doing the same thing.
Right.
Go back to if you believe in the white man, then go back to his documentation and look at what he says, because it only seems that our people believe what he says.
Right.
So it's documented who we are. It's documented what we've done. It's documented where we were.
Right.
And when they couldn't no longer document us, they put census records.
That's
on us.
right.
You know what I mean? They started
right.
putting the census to find out where we were.
Where we were.
And
where
then,
are you?
And then they wrote down Negro.
Right. How do you think DNA testing has brought about, I hate using the word evolution, but I will, brought about the evolution of people actually knowing who they are and where they're from?
Still not there. It hasn't. They're doing that now with DNA, and what they found within DNA is there is no genetic marker or makeup that says that you're Indian. There is no genetic marker that says you're Native American.
3 more such like devils came rushing in with the like antique tricks, painted half black, half red, but all their eyes were painted white, and some red strokes like 100 machados along their cheeks. Round about him, those fiends danced a pretty while, and then came in 3 more as ugly as the rest, with red eyes and white strokes over their black faces. At last they all sat down right against him.
Despite his racist remark labeling them as devils and ugly, he explicitly mentions that their faces were black. As the narrative progresses to page 125, he proceeds with his argument and emphasizes this fact.
2 days after, Powhatan, having disguised himself in the most fearful manner he could, caused Captain Smith to be brought forth to a great house in the woods, and thereupon a mat by the fire to be left alone. Not long after, from behind a mat, that divided the house was made the most dolefulest noise he ever heard. Then Powhatan, more like a devil than a man, with some 200 more as black as himself, came unto him and told him now they were friends.
In this passage, John Smith recounts that King Powhatan had 200 individuals who were just as dark-skinned as he was. This suggests that not only was King Powhatan black, but also that his tribe shared the same physical characteristic. The book Old Panama and Castilla del Oro offers further evidence. On page 11, in the footnotes, March 30th, 1885, Poland was entirely consumed, with the exception of the buildings of the Panama Railroad, the French Canal Company, and the Pacific Mail Steamship Line. The loss was estimated at $6 million and 10,000 persons were left shelterless. This fire was started by Pedro Preston and a horde of dark-skinned insurgents at the outset of a so-called revolution. End quote. The revolution led by Pedro Preston will be addressed in the future. Nevertheless, the insurgents were described as having dark skin, and it becomes clear that these dark-skinned insurgents were in fact the indigenous people of South America, as we will discover in the following passage.
The aboriginal people of the Bahamas, the Lucayans, discovered by Columbus, were a tall, graceful, dark-skinned race of barbarians. They were gentle and loving, quite unlike their cousins on the mainland, or their fierce neighbors to the south, the Caribs, who dwelt in the Lesser Antilles. They possessed pottery and stone implements, like celts, arrowheads, mortars, and pestles, and were expert in the use of their canoes. Columbus well describes them. All of them go as naked as they came into the world. Their forms are graceful, their features good, their hair as coarse as a horse's tail, cut short in front, and worn long upon their shoulders. They are dark of complexion, like the Canary Islanders, and paint themselves in various colors.
End quote. The colonizers did not bring an excessive number of slaves to the Bahamas that would surpass their own population, nor did they make any reference to such a possibility. In reality, they acknowledged that the indigenous dark-skinned population were related to the inhabitants of the neighboring islands and even the North American mainland.